14 years ago, my family and I were part of the ever-increasing wave of Iranian immigrants who moved to Canada in search of a better life for themselves. We are members of the estimated 40 to 45,000 Iranians living in British Columbia, an estimated 30,000 Iranians living in the Greater Vancouver Regional District, and a part of a racial minority that the North Shore News, in the year 2003, pronounced as the largest group of immigrants residing on the North Shore District. During the past 14 years, my family and I would attend the annual Iranian Nowruz or New Year's celebration at Ambleside Park on the North Shore. In the midst of traditional celebration and the crowds of Iranians, I would always perceive what was around me as a local Iranian community. But since my discussion with members of our minority group, I have learned that there are roughly 40 other celebrations happening separately on the same day by different Iranian subcultural groups within our minority. So I was curious to find out if a single strong local Iranian community exists, which gives our minority group an identity as a whole.
Not really.
No.
Absolutely exists.
No.
Yes and no.
I don't think it's there.
No.
Yes, we have a community.
Unfortunately, no.
Seeing no unanimous response to this question, I was curious to dig deeper below the surface and find out how it is that our growing racial minority does not yet have a centralized and strong local community of its own. I asked this of clinical counselor Dr. Asadola.
When emotionally and traditionally we are not attached with one another, how could we have communal relationship? How could we even have a community? When we don't have those type of support system in place, it's very difficult for us to walk alongside of each other. Having those shops and those services do not constitute of having a community. Again, that communal relationship, that solidarity, that a strong vehicle for having an effective network system in all facets of life are not available. It's just a matter of we are taking care of our daily needs. Because they are scattered, they are not under one roof, they are not organized, they are not centralized, then no, it's not a community again.
Clinical counselor Sherry Shirari offers a different definition of a community based on interaction amongst its members.
But in the sense of the interaction amongst the individual that they came from Iran, in a way we have a community because there are service providers that they speak Iranian, that they are into the government or system in place here, helping each other. So in a way, there are interaction among them.
Amin Tufani believes we have Iranian communities rather than one community.
Well, I believe we do have a community, but I would refer to it as a hypothetical community. It's not a real community in the sense that we do not have a sense of belonging to it. We do, however, refer to it when talking to non-Persians. We do brag about it. But it's not really there. I would call it a virtual community. Because if you compare it to other functional communities, we don't have that level of functionality there. It's just, I think we all feel the void within there. What we have instead is smaller social structures. Maybe we could call these social packets. And within these smaller subcultural, communities, we seem to be functioning pretty well. But in the sense of a major community, a large community as a whole, I don't think it's there. It's a virtual community.
Dr. Mitra Sadraameli offers an alternative opinion.
So yes, I think that the Iranian community, the community exists. It may be a very loosely defined community. It may not be quite as structured as some other cultures and countries that have sent immigrants to Canada. But it certainly exists because when you get a group of Iranians in one place, when you have a group of Iranians celebrating the same important dates on the calendar, when you have Iranians celebrating the same cultural icons, that by definition creates a community around those items, those things, and that exists. You have Iranians that get together purely based on culture, Nowruz, Mehragan, Yalda. So if you take those as a sign of community, absolutely, there is a very healthy and vital Iranian community. But as I said, it's very loosely defined. We don't feel the need to be so exclusive and so inclusive and so inward-looking. We can do all these things and at the same time have a very healthy relationship with the community at large. And those two aren't necessarily in conflict with one another. It doesn't matter whether we have 40 different groups or 100 different groups. We're still celebrating the same thing, maybe with slightly different celebrations and maybe with slightly different ceremonies. But at the end of the day, you're celebrating the same concept. And it's that concept that brings you together, not how you go about celebrating it. Those things become inconsequential. The thing that's important is that you all believe, you all came together on that date. It wasn't 6 different days during the week, it was just that one day and for one particular purpose. And that makes you part of that community.
Celebrating the same concept may mean that we are part of the same community, but what about the benefits that a community can offer us? A sense of belonging, identity, communal relationship, and support network. Do we Iranians have this? Social worker Mina Mulavi comments.
I think the superficial, more surface stuff, yes. But when we dig in deeper in terms of supporting each other and really truly for an Iranian not to feel alone at times and feel supported, that doesn't exist in a formal way. I mean, there's ad hoc kind of a way, but not formal. And again, because there are, I think, historical patterns that make it difficult for people to, let go of their past issues, such as, the class issue or the political issue or how they were treated in Iranian history in general.
Amin Tufani shares a similar view.
We need to look at the history, our historical background. And by history, I'm not referring to the last 20 years. I would rather say the last 2,000 or 3,000 years. We come from a very rich culture, which has had an extensive history, and we have had all these events. And some of these events, political, social, and whatnot, have had some special effects. After each major trauma that happens to a large culture, like the Persians, you get polarization in the community. People tend to think of each other as insiders and outsiders. And this makes them very judgmental of each other. This is a self-destructive pattern when it comes to forming a community, a functional community. I've noticed that many businesses do not really have a preference for doing business with other Persian businesses. I wouldn't say that they try to avoid each other, but there's certainly this tendency not to work together.
Arman Rahmim comments on the sense of communal bonding.
I think just by definition, the word community implies that it's something more than the sum of its individuals. And what we really have is simply Iranians, not really something, a coherent group that's beyond just the individual. We do have these various gatherings that do take place. I have attended some of them too. What I can say is that there's interesting programs happening in them. I don't really feel a strong sense of bonding or a sense of community in that sense at all.
Sherry Shagaghi emphasizes our cultural diversity as Iranians as one of the reasons for which there is a lack of an existing Iranian community center that would welcome and assist all Iranian members within our minority.
But don't forget, when we're talking about Iranian community, if we go back to the root of where we're coming from and in our culture, in our own country, you wouldn't ever find a whole blanket of group that identifying as Iranian, because we have Turks and Fars and Baluch and people from Khorasan and a whole different region of Iran, which is they have their own characteristic. People from Isfahan is totally different than Tabriz. So they are not really, they are Iranian, they might go to school and study everything in Persian language, but they are not at the same time in one category. Don't forget that Iranian as an immigrant and refugee into this country are very young. The history for us is very young here. So if you compare with Chinese, that they have a Chinese community that been here for generation and generation and years and years and years, we can't compare these two, wave of migration together.
But even with our young history of more or less 20 years in Canada as immigrants, Has our minority group been able to at least form the foundation for an effective support system to help fellow Iranians cope with their challenges and difficulties as members of this so-called community? According to community advocate and immigration consultant Mr. Zanjani, roughly 20% of the Iranians who live on the North Shore are on welfare. I asked Mr. Zanjani if they have support services within our minority group to assist them.
But Iranians on their own, no. I am aware of a few individuals that when there is a problem among Iranian family, they do call other people and ask for financial support or contribution. We have done almost in 10 times, but as a kind of systematic approach to the problem, no.
What sort of support network and services do we have within our minority group to help the Iranian refugees in their integration process?
Is not much support for the Iranian community. There are a few associations here and there, or a few organizations like North Shore Multicultural Society, which Iranians also use their services. While they are during that period, when they are applying to be eligible to be a refugee, there is a waiting period of a month or 3 weeks. During that period, they have no support whatsoever. After 1 month, they can use their government funding or resources. There is no Iranian association to help them.
Dr. Sharvini elaborates on what it is that we lack as a minority group in need of a stronger community.
منتها دو تا چیز بزرگ و دو تا فاکتور بزرگ وجود نداشته. یه فاکتور مالی بوده، یه فاکتور که باز از فاکتور مالی مهمتره، فاکتور نیروی انسانی است که در جامعه ایرانی تا حالا به اون شکل پیش نیامده.
As one of my participants pointed out, what we are also missing is a support network for Iranian newcomers to rely on in their process of positive integration. So again, you didn't feel that we had this Iranian community to support you and your family when you came here and to help you with making that transition?
Not at all.
Which brings me to my next question. What is it then that we are lacking or that we need to improve on in order to build a single, strong Iranian community, or to some, a stronger local Iranian community? Mina Molavi stresses the importance of voting and active participation in the society at large by Iranian members of our minority.
Overall, Iranians, although even at this point there's elections and so forth, they have never truly believed that they have a say in the way the political system works, or they have the power to change things. That's why, coming to Canada, they often, underestimate the power of voting. A lot of them don't even know when the vote time is, or they might know about the federal elections and some major provincial elections, but none of them, hardly any, would go and participate in the city council elections and so forth like that. So the issue becomes the level of representation of Iranians and their best interests within the larger society. Because if you do not go out there and vote, then how are your concerns going to be heard? As a community, we need to give ourselves the permission to be called Canadians, to and take ownership of this society and feel that, yes, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to vote and I have a say in what will happen in this society, and I'm part of the investment of this society.
Persian settlement counselor and family counselor Mrs. Saifi on the issue of trust.
We have to trust each other first. Because, when we don't trust each other, we're not going to believe each other. We're not going to work with each other in the community. So, we have to be educated in this way to understand that we're all, Iranian. We all came from Iran, and we want to integrate to the Canadian system also. And we want to have community that works for both sides, Canadian and Iranian.
Mrs. Gambari believes that we need a person who would take the initiative to strengthen and direct our minority group.
یک نفر باید بیسته این مجمع و این جامعه رو درست کنه، تشکیل بده. یه سازنده میخواد.
We have to trust each other first. because when we don't trust each other, we're not going to believe each other, we're not going to work with each other in a community. So we have to be educated in this way to understand that we all Iranian, we all came from Iran, and we want to integrate to the Canadian system also, and we want to have community that works for the both sides, Canadian and Iranian.
To realize and to show to others that we really do have problems. Once we sort of believe in that, not just in our minds, but just believing that in our attitudes, we're going to come up with solutions to that problem and try to resolve the conflicts and try to form a community that we can rely on. I think one thing that we really need to start concentrating on is long-term planning. This is something we have not put a lot of investment on. Promoting a sense of need for volunteer actions and acts. What we really need is to have such individuals that are also very participant in their communities. And that then would make the connection that, hey, this is a person that's done extremely well, that's been recognized by the non-Iranian community at large, and this is a person that is proud and of his own culture and therefore result in role models. And having role models that are not back home, role models that are not back in time, role models that are here, that are in the same situation, same society, same city, same country, and so forth. Having those people would do a lot of work for the youth.
What we are lacking, then could we say, a will, a strong willpower. See, we have become very individualized, unfortunately. The life in the West is based on individualism. Good or bad, I'm not judging that. That's not my position here. But back home, based on my own understanding and from Iranian culture, we live in a very collective environment. We think collectively. We do things collectively. Once there is a problem for one member of the family, all members come to help. But again, unfortunately, we have become very individualized here. We means Iranian, and everybody thinks about his or her own safety, his or her own pocket, his or her own well-being. We can't progress like that. We can't establish a community like that, because our mentality and our understanding about community is different than the host society, the majority groups. We would be able to practice our own traditions, our own religious beliefs, our own political beliefs. Doesn't matter. I think that's healthy. That's another meaning of democracy, and we came here to do that. However, we could pool our resources and have a centralized energy, centralized cultural center for all Iranian, regardless of their background. And that's not utopian. That being able to exercise your individuality as well as to think and to act within a collective body.
And what role does the Canadian society play in assisting our minority group to build a stronger local Iranian community?
The host country, it's very important their role in order to receive these people, but people individual in their own home, I mean, how they can do it. There should be a proper system in place in order to give the education, proper education to the host community, which is Canadian in general, to receive these new immigrant refugees and get over. There are little programs, but I think it's not enough. And if the government would help to give more education and more programs for both ends, that would help really much better to pave the way for the immigrant and refugees on their way of integration.
Mina Mulavi.
I think the Canadian society at large needs to understand that Canada is not the same Canada as 50 years ago, and accordingly they need to change their services, they need to change the way the schools operate and the way the school counselors are working. Everybody needs to get cultural sensitivity education and cultural competence education to be able to work with diverse communities.
It seemed to me that suddenly my awareness of the multifaceted, more complex, broader issues and challenges facing our minority group today changed my idea of what a community is about and what that community can offer its members. I listened to what potential the stronger, centralized local Iranian community has in helping to improve the quality of life for all fellow Iranians. Sheyda Moheb Khosravi.
If we could have a center that they, especially like the young people, that they just come in and they don't know the language, they don't know anything about the schools, about the people. They could go there and they could ask the questions, get to know other people, get to know other Persians, and they can find friends, and and they can help them with the language, with the culture.
We can imagine if we do have a center, we will have our gathering meetings there, our weddings there, cultural and recreational activities to be achieved there. So many things. Maybe a social worker, a community worker, maybe a kind of, services to provide food bank, shelter.
I could envision a mentorship program. Well, senior students, people who have lived in this country for more than maybe 4 or 5 years, could help newcomers. And this could be mutually beneficial. Another aspect of this, a positive aspect of this community could be, it could have some implications for the business networking. When you have a sense of community, you tend to focus on what you have in common with other people. That's going to help many people connect to their traditional background, to their rich history, to their rich culture. That is going to be a boost in self-esteem for many of us, I believe, for the youth.
Our membership would feel a sense of belonging, number one. Number two, we would be able to reduce and hopefully eradicate or eliminate identity crisis. Number three, we would have well-defined, established, and centralized social services and programs for the newcomers and immigrants as well. Number four, consequently, we would have a meaningful and effective social network that it would allow us to have peace of mind, serenity, joyful life, and it would enhance our self-esteem, it would enhance our motivation, as well as it would automatically generate new energy, new positive energy towards non-Iranians. You see, this is when it would allow us the opportunity to participate in community events at large. Therefore, we would become we would be able to socialize easier. Therefore, it would enhance and pave the way towards our adaptation or integration into a Canadian culture.
Also, finding a warm environment to go and share their ideas, and also if they have any problem, personal problem, psychological problem, family problem, any problem, if they know that they have this kind of community, they're going to be more positive to take care of each other, and also know that they're not going to be alone.
On a personal level, the possibility of this wish, or arzu, as one Iranian participant described, turning it into a reality seemed more plausible and reasonable to me when, during my research, as a non-Baha'i, I was invited by members of the Baha'i community to attend an event at their local community center. My observations there led me to reflect that perhaps the sense of community, strength, and unity of this subcultural group, or other religious groups, such as Muslims, Christians, Zoroastrians, Jews, or our ethnic groups, the likes of Azerbaijanis, Baluchis, Fars, and Kurds, to name a few of each subgroup, could be a role model for this larger, stronger Iranian community that we're discussing. More importantly, it was a kind yet accepting gesture that showed me that the first step of setting aside our differences in order to establish a centralized and stronger Iranian community with a non-religious, non-political, non-ethnic, nor even class-affiliated community center that welcomes and assists all Iranians will be possible in the near future. At the same time, news of success on the local level was also brought to my attention when I learned that an Iranian committee working to bring Iranians one step closer to this vision has recently gained provincial recognition as the Iranian Canadian Congress Society. My own arzu for Iranians to take this first step of focusing on what we have in common in order to overcome our present barriers and issues as a minority group and build this vision of a stronger local community resonates in the voices of the Iranian participants.
We're Persians, we're Iranians, and that's the bottom line. And I think when we're in a foreign country, we need to recognize that.
First, you are Iranian. You see, you are not Turk first. You are not Mashhadi first. You are not Baluchi first. You are not Kurd first. You are Iranian first. If we have that idea in our mind, if we are able to cultivate that in our minds and the mind of our children, and then nurture that idea, I'm sure we will be able to pave the way and to have an effective community.
It doesn't matter what religion or language we speak in Persian culture. It is important that we are Persian. We don't have to necessarily be separated from each other.
I suggest instead of trying to change each other, just concentrate on changing ourselves. If you want to see a positive change in the community, the so-called community, you can be the first, advocate of that.
I think every single person has to take this responsibility and think as a Persian to have to do something for his or her own culture and community.
And we will be able to offer our children a more happy life, joyful life, healthy life. And this is what we have migrated for, to live in Canada, because what Canada is able to offer us: happiness, comfort, peace, opportunity. Let's utilize those. But we have to clean the house first.